Death is the one certainty that haunts every human life, our ultimate destination, wrapped in mystery. We may not know when or how, but we all know that, and somehow, that knowledge changes everything. Whenever humanity confronts the great unknown, be it the birth of the cosmos, the nature of evil, or the riddle of death, our unconscious doesn't stay silent. It responds, not with reason, but with symbols, stories, myths. These myths, passed down in every religion and culture, aren't just fanciful tales. They're what Jung called mythologems, timeless, recurring motifs that echo through the human psyche. Life after death, for example, isn't just a belief, it's an archetype, a psychological truth embedded deep in the structure of our minds. Whether it's reincarnation, resurrection, or reunion with the divine, the image of something beyond death persists. Why? Because it speaks to something ancient inside us, something that refuses to believe that death is the end. Man is a mystery. That mystery must be solved, and if you spend your whole life trying to solve it, don't say you've wasted your time. Fyodor Dostoevsky. In psychology, especially in Jung's work, dreams become crucial in approaching this mystery. Unlike myths or scriptures, often distorted by layers of tradition and culture, dreams emerge raw and unfiltered from the unconscious. They aren't edited. They don't care about our theories. They are nature speaking directly to us, and when they speak of death, we should listen. Dreams are not inventions. They simply happen. We don't choose them. They choose us. And in doing so, they often present a more objective insight into the nature of death than any philosophy ever could. In rare cases, like lucid dreaming, we might shape our dreams slightly. But in most cases, they are spontaneous revelations, glimpses into our deepest instincts, fears, and perhaps destinies. Carl Jung didn't try to fit every dream into a neat box. Instead, he practiced amplification, looking at dreams through a wide lens, drawing connections between symbols and the vast web of human mythology, art, and religion. If you dream of a bird, for instance, Jung would ask, what have birds meant across cultures? What myths feature them? What role do they play in our collective imagination? This process isn't about explaining a dream, it's about listening to it, about turning up the volume on the whispering voice of the soul. And perhaps the most haunting thing dreams whisper is this: death is not a wall, it's a door. What if everything we believe about death, that it's final, irreversible, absolute, is only a partial truth? We talk about death as if it's a curtain drop, the last breath, the lights going out. But that's just the visible part, the part science can observe, chart, pronounce. The real drama might be happening elsewhere, in the quiet depths of the unconscious. What does that part of us know about death? That's the question Jungian analyst Marie-Louise von Franz spent her life exploring. Her book on dreams and death asks not just what death is, but what the psyche, the soul's hidden voice, believes it to be. She and her colleagues launched a remarkable research project called The Alchemy of Death, gathering over 2,500 dreams from people at or near the end of life. Here's the haunting discovery. Not a single dream depicted death as a final ending. Not one. Instead, every dream pointed to a transformation, a crossing over, a shift, a passage into something else. Von Franz writes, echoing Jung's insight, the unconscious psyche pays very little attention to the abrupt end of bodily life. It behaves as if the psychic life of the individual will simply continue. In other words, the unconscious seems to believe in an afterlife. Let that sink in. The deepest part of you, the part you don't control, the part that dreams in symbols and speaks in silence, acts as though death is just a transition, not extinction. Of course, it's easy to forget this. We're so deeply fused with our physical selves that we assume the end of the body is the end of everything. Man has such a predilection for systems and abstract conclusions that he is ready to distort the truth intentionally. He is ready to deny the evidence of his senses just to justify his logic. Fyodor Dostoevsky, Notes from Underground. Dostoevsky reminds us that reason, while useful, can blind us. We forget that our soul may be whispering a different story. Nowhere is that whisper louder than in ancient spiritual traditions like Hinduism. There, The journey of life isn't about clinging to the ego, the ahamkara, but learning to disidentify from it. To realize, instead, that we are the Atman, the eternal, formless self that exists beyond flesh. In this view, death isn't destruction, it's unmasking. The body, along with the visible world, is Maya, an illusion, and to die is to step beyond the veil and awaken to what has always been true, that the Atman is one with Brahman, or ultimate reality. This isn't just philosophy. Dreams themselves echo it. They speak not in words but in living metaphors, doors opening, tunnels narrowing, old bodies left behind like clothing. And beyond them, light, movement, a presence, sometimes familiar, sometimes strange, always intensely real. So, what are we to make of all this? If dreams are the language of the soul, and they consistently treat death not as an end but as a passage, shouldn't we at least consider the possibility that our story doesn't stop at the tombstone? The body may collapse, but the self, it might just be walking through a new door. Imagine this, you've just died. Or at least that's what the doctors say, but instead of darkness, there's light, peace, silence. You float above your body, seeing it as if it belongs to someone else. Then, a tunnel, a voice, a warmth that doesn't burn, a presence so familiar, it feels like home. This is the world of near-death experiences, or NDEs, a term coined by psychiatrist Raymond Moody in his 1975 book, Life After Life. Since then, thousands of people across the globe have come back from the brink of death with eerily similar stories. They speak of floating above their hospital beds, feeling free from pain and fear, passing through tunnels, encountering radiant beings, and watching their entire lives flash before their eyes, like the universe rewinding itself. They describe entering a realm more real than reality itself. Let that phrase settle in. More real than reality. What are we to make of this? The soul is healed by being with children. Fyodor Dostoevsky. Children don't intellectualize the world, they feel it. And those who return from NDEs often sound like children, awestruck, humbled, deeply changed. What they touch isn't explainable, but it's unforgettable. Modern research has taken these accounts seriously. The implications are staggering. If consciousness persists after clinical death, then maybe the brain isn't the source of consciousness, it's the receiver. Like a radio dialed into a particular frequency of existence. And when the dial is turned off, the signal continues. Carl Jung himself had a profound NDE after a heart attack in 1944. What he saw shook him to his core. He described being in a cosmic space where time collapsed. Past, present, and future merged into one. Then came the interruption. A voice. You must go back. His vision ended. Reality returned. But it didn't feel like home. He called this world a box system. Gray, restrictive, artificial. He had seen something brighter, something realer than this. Now I must return to the box system again, he lamented. Jung felt that our physical reality dampens the full intensity of our psychic being. Our minds are tuned down to lower frequencies, bound by time and space. But dreams and NDEs, they break through those boundaries. They remind us that the psyche isn't confined by the body, and perhaps never was. At night, Jung was flooded with visions, vivid, timeless, ecstatic. He described them like this. It is impossible to convey the beauty and intensity of emotion. We shy away from the word eternal, but I can describe the experience only as the ecstasy of a non-temporal state in which present, past, and future are one. Think about that. A moment so rich it contains all of time. But what happens to the self during these experiences? Who are we when we die? This is where Jungian psychology offers a remarkable insight. In many NDEs, people report meeting a voice or presence, a radiant being that feels intimately familiar. Jung called this archetypal force the self, the totality of who we are, beyond ego. One man in a coma described being drawn toward a light. A hand reached for him. He joined it and felt his spirit partially merge with the light being. We were two, and yet, somehow, one. He had full control of everything that was going on, as far as I was concerned. Others described shedding their everyday egos like old clothes, revealing something truer underneath. One patient recalled, "My new ego had nothing to do with the ego of this world. It was a spirit, absolute, unchangeable, indivisible, unique like a fingerprint, but also part of an infinite, well-ordered whole." This is what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming your true self. And strangely, what people strive for in life seems to happen naturally, at death. One man described himself as a small sphere inside a giant glowing orb, the ego inside the self, and yet there's danger too. Jung warned, if we identify too much with the ego, we become inflated, narcissistic, detached from our essence. If we stray too far from the self, life feels empty, meaningless. Death, in this light, becomes the final confrontation. The ego meets the self, and the soul is asked, "Are you ready to come home?" But not everyone gets to stay. Many NDE survivors recall a moment when a voice told them, "You must go back." The feeling is often devastating. Reality now seems faded, hollow. They've glimpsed something eternal. And now, they're back in the box. Pain and suffering are always inevitable for a large intelligence and a deep heart. The really great men must, I think, have great sadness on earth. Dostoevsky, Crime and Punishment. Those who've seen beyond this life often return, transformed but burdened, with a new longing, a silent sadness, not for death, but for that mysterious reality beyond it. And here's the mystery. If our consciousness can survive death, if our ego can encounter the self, if the unconscious behaves as though death is a beginning, not an end, then maybe the question isn't what happens after death. Maybe the real question is, what part of us is already there? What if your dreams knew you were going to die before your conscious mind had the faintest clue? Not metaphorically, literally. Among the 2,500 dreams collected by Jungian analyst Marie-Louise von Franz and her team, there was a small, eerie category that stood out: dreams that predicted death. These weren't just about the idea of death. They came from people who actually died not long after having them. These dreams are what we call death dreams, precognitive visions from the unconscious that anticipate, in symbolic language, the nearness of physical death. But here's the twist. They rarely present death as an end. Instead, they almost always point to something beyond it, a continuation, a transformation, a new reality just on the other side. And this begs a haunting question. What does the soul know that the ego doesn't? The soul is often silent, but when it speaks in fire. Dostoevsky, paraphrased from The Idiot von Franz, believed that dreams aren't here to convince us of anything, not even the afterlife. The job of the psychologist, she insisted, isn't to preach belief, but to listen, to guide the dreamer toward understanding the symbols and let the meaning unfold from within. If the dreamer finds comfort or insight, so be it. If they find dread, denial, or awakening, so be it. Because the unconscious doesn't sugarcoat. Sometimes when a person is unaware of their approaching death, or worse, in denial, their dreams become shockingly direct. One woman, battling cancer, dreamt that her wristwatch had broken. A watchmaker examined it and told her bluntly, "It's beyond repair." Days later, she dreamt her favorite tree had fallen. It was brutal, it was symbolic, and it was clear. She understood. Time was running out, and yet, she lived on for years, more peaceful and grounded than before. Her dreams hadn't foretold an imminent end. They had prepared her for it. That's the strange paradox of death dreams. Just because we dream of death doesn't mean we're about to die. Sometimes the psyche just wants us to confront mortality, to wake up, to let go of illusions, to live better, more consciously, a memento mori whispered in our sleep. But then again, sometimes, the message is final. Von Franz noted something peculiar. Every once in a while, you hear a death dream and you just know. A shiver runs through your body. The air feels different. Rationally, there's no explanation, but something in you whispers, "This one means death. One of her colleagues had a powerful dream while gravely ill. It said, "You can go on living if you want." He chose to fight. He recovered. Another person dreamed, "It is your destiny to die." And they did. This is the mystery. Death dreams live in the strange space between fate and freedom, between what is fixed and what is still unfolding. Because dreams don't just predict, they prepare. The mystery of human existence lies not in just staying alive, but in finding something to live for. Fyodor Dostoevsky, The Brothers. Karamazov. Death, in that sense, is not just a biological event, it's a psychological threshold, and dreams, especially as we age, seem to guide us toward it. That's why death dreams become more common in the second half of life. As the body starts to decline and outer achievements plateau, the psyche turns inward. It begins a silent preparation, a spiritual maturing. Von Franz called this the opus magnum, the great work of life. Not our career, not our resume, but our conscious integration of death. From midlife onward, we don't just live toward death, we live with it, like a shadow at our side, urging us to become whole. But this can happen even earlier. Jung once described a chilling case. A 10-year-old girl gifted her psychiatrist father a booklet of dreams, 12 in total, 9 of them centered around death, destruction, and rebirth. Jung was stunned. These weren't ordinary childhood fantasies. They were the dreams of someone approaching death. 1 year later, on Christmas Day, she died of an infectious disease. Death dreams also don't always come for the dreamer. Sometimes they appear when someone close to you is dying. A former patient of Jung's had a dream in which their doctor, who seemed perfectly fine, was engulfed in flames. At the time, the doctor had only just entered the hospital. 3 weeks later, he passed away. Before Jung himself died, his friend Lorenz von der Post had a dream of Jung waving and calling out, "I'll be seeing you." That same day, lightning struck Jung's favorite tree in his garden. Was it coincidence? Or was nature participating in the farewell? Because in the end, death dreams aren't just about endings. They're invitations to face something we all try to avoid, that the curtain will fall and no one escapes the stage. And yet, when death is accepted, not feared, it transforms. It becomes a guide, a silent companion, a doorway, not a wall. And our dreams, they become the maps. What if everything we think about life and death is reversed? What if birth is the entry into a prison and death, the release? Jung once described the unconscious as inhabiting a realm untouched by time and space. In that state of being, birth becomes a kind of death, into form, into limitation. And death, it becomes a birth into formlessness, into the vast wholeness of what we truly are. In that form of being, our birth is a death and our death a birth. The scales of the whole hang balanced. This is more than poetic metaphor. In the language of Jungian psychology, it's a truth that the unconscious insists we face. Because death isn't simply about the end of life, it's about the completion of something far greater, the self. At the core of Jung's work lies the process of individuation, the slow, often painful journey of becoming your truest self, a union of opposites, a reconciliation of the conscious and unconscious, the ego and the soul. And in that final moment, when life slips from our fingertips, something strange happens. The self steps forward, and for those who have spent their lives ignoring it, it may be the first time they've ever truly met. The mystery of human existence lies not in just staying alive, but in finding something to live for. Fyodor Dostoevsky. In the language of the psyche, death is not an erasure. It's a culmination, a ripening, the great work, the opus magnum of the soul completing its arc. That's why people who feel they've fulfilled their purpose often approach death not with fear, but with peace. They've tasted wholeness, and when you've become who you were meant to be, what more is there to fear? At the end of individuation, something paradoxical happens. You become fully yourself, utterly unique, and at the same time, one with all things. It's the ultimate paradox, individuality and unity, held in the same breath. And here's where it gets even more mysterious. Sometimes, just before death, the unconscious compresses this entire process, symbolically, vividly in a dream. In these dreams, the self often appears not as a concept, but as a presence, a figure, a voice, even a departed loved one. These are called metapsychic dreams, and they're unlike anything else. They carry a strange emotional gravity, a touch of eternity, as von Franz called it. You know when you've had one because the air around it feels different. In metapsychic dreams, the dead come back, not as memories, but as beings. Sometimes they're symbolic, other times, maybe not. This is slippery ground, even for psychologists. It's easy to dismiss these dreams as projections of a parent complex or a desperate wish. But what if, just sometimes, they're real? Jung had such a dream 6 weeks after his father died. His father appeared and said, "I made a good recovery. I'm coming home." The dream repeated 2 nights later. It was the first time Jung truly contemplated the reality of life after death. He had similar dreams of his late wife. In one, she was continuing her life's work, completing the Grail legend she had left unfinished. It was as if, in death, she had simply changed rooms. Von Franz had her own experience. 3 weeks after her father died, he appeared in a dream and told her he was studying music at an academy. He walked into the guest room and said, "Now I am only a guest." She woke up in a sweat, burning hot. Jung believed this was a reaction to the coldness of the realm of the dead, the dreamer's body pushing back against an encounter too close for comfort. Jung suggested that ghosts, or apparitions, drain psychic energy to become visible. Witnesses even reported an electric vibration when touching a phantom. There's something uncanny, dangerous even, about the living getting too close to the dead. Because while our paths may overlap, these two worlds are not meant to merge. There is something at the bottom of every new human thought, every thought of genius, or even every earnest thought that springs up in any brain, which has a spark of the eternal in it. Dostoevsky, the brothers, Karamazov. These dreams seem to suggest that what we carry into the beyond is whatever substance of the self we've managed to integrate during life. In simpler terms, the more consciously we live, the less unfinished business we take with us. Which raises a quietly profound question. Are we building our afterlife right now, through every act of awareness? The more you know yourself, the more whole you become. And the more whole you become, the less death has to teach you when it comes. That, perhaps, is the final secret. Dreams about the dead, whether they're real, symbolic, or somewhere in between, aren't about ghosts. They're about the living, about you, about whether you're paying attention, and whether you're becoming who you're meant to be. What if death doesn't come in words or theology, but in roots, flowers, wheat fields, and winter forests? When people near the end of life begin to dream, something fascinating happens. Nature itself starts speaking for the soul. And often, it doesn't speak of endings, but of returns. One man, 52 years old, dreamt of an ambulance coming to take him to the hospital for cancer surgery. But in the dream, the driver opens the back door, and inside is a white coffin. The man wakes up terrified. He would, in fact, never leave the hospital alive. But here's where the story turns. After accepting that the operation would not save him, his dreams shifted. He found himself walking through a cold, misty forest. Trees crashed in the distance, the echo of chainsaws filled the silence. Then, suddenly, sunlight. The season changed. The forest bloomed. His father, long since passed, appeared and said, "Look, here is the forest again. Don't pay any attention to what's happening down there. Down there, where the body is, where the trees fall, where the cancer spreads. But up here, in the dreamscape of the soul, life continues. This is the wisdom of the unconscious. It doesn't try to fix the body. It lets go of it, and instead, it begins preparing the dreamer for something else. It's no coincidence that the image is a forest. In the symbolic language of the unconscious, vegetation is resurrection. Man grows used to everything, the scoundrel. Dostoevsky, crime and punishment. We grow used to life and used to death, but what dreams show us is that nothing really ends. It merely transforms. In nature, everything dies to be reborn. Plants fall in winter, and from their roots, spring returns. and so it is with the soul. Another man, recently diagnosed with a terminal illness, came to von Franz. He was an atheist, refused to believe in anything beyond. But that night, he dreamt of a green wheat field, young, not yet ripe. A herd of cattle stormed in and trampled everything. Then, a voice from above said, "Everything seems to be destroyed, but from the roots under the earth, the wheat will grow again." He couldn't accept the dream. He died unreconciled. But the image stayed. Wheat crushed above, yet alive below. It's an ancient image. In the Bible, Christ says, "Unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit." John 12:24. In Egyptian mythology, the god Osiris, who dies and is resurrected, is symbolized by wheat. The dead were buried with seeds. If the seeds sprouted, it was a sign, resurrection complete. It's not just metaphor. It's the archetype of renewal, a truth deeper than logic. This is why the dying often dream of forests, trees, gardens, flowers. It's not fantasy. It's the psyche returning to its roots, literally. And flowers, they're more than just comforting symbols. They're mandalas, circular patterns of wholeness, beauty, and the self. The Buddha, the enlightened one, sits on a lotus, and in death dreams, that image returns again and again. One of von Franz's patients, near the end, had a vision during active imagination. She saw a radiant flower, not just outside her, but as her. She said, "I am this flower. It has entered me and been transformed into a human being. I am fully rooted, radiantly eternal. I am the flower, and no one can harm me." That's not a poetic metaphor. That's someone on the edge of death realizing they are not just dying, they are becoming. The unconscious reveals what dies is not the soul, but the shell. What's real goes on blooming. This is why we bring flowers to funerals. Yes, they symbolize sympathy, but unconsciously, they are resurrection magic, a silent hope that what has fallen will rise again, that the root still lives. The darker the night, the brighter the stars. Dostoevsky, Crime and Punishment. Even in the darkest dream, when the forest is winter, when the wheat is trampled, when the flower wilts, something endures, something invisible, something essential, and that something might just be you. So the next time you see a dream filled with leaves, gardens, blossoms, and soil, don't dismiss it. That may be your soul's way of preparing, not for disappearance, but for emergence. Because in the unconscious, death is not the end of life. It's the beginning of becoming. When we think of fire, we often think of destruction, of hellfire, punishment, endings. But in dreams, especially those surrounding death, fire tells a different story. It doesn't only burn, it purifies. From ancient Egypt to early Christianity, fire was understood as both punishment and transformation. Origen of Alexandria rejected eternal damnation. He saw fire as purgation, a sacred cleansing for those not yet whole. Even the Egyptian underworld includes a lake of fire, not to torment, but to reveal what is eternal. One ancient funerary spell reads, "I am the shapeless one in the midst of the fire. I enter the flames and come out. The shining flames do not sting me. They do not burn me." Why? Because what is eternal cannot be touched by flame. A terminally ill man, already dreaming of his transition beyond the forest of suffering, once dreamt of fire raging through a green wood. Everything turned to black ash, except one thing, a round, red boulder, untouched by flame. The man thought, "That one, the fire has not blackened." This is the philosopher's stone, the immortal center, the indestructible self. In alchemy, creating the stone was the goal of the opus magnum, the great work. But the process began with decay, the nigredo, or blackening, death, decomposition. Only then could the soul be purified, albedo, and, finally, reborn in the union of opposites, rubedo. In that final stage, the philosopher's stone emerges, not destroyed by fire, but revealed through it. Jung believed the lapis, the stone, symbolized the eternal self that continues after death. What is hell? I maintain that it is the suffering of being unable to love. Fyodor Dostoevsky, The Brothers. Karamazov love, inner truth and wholeness. These are the fruits that survive death, and sometimes, quite literally, death dreams show us fruit. One elderly man, near the end of life, dreamt of a sick, dying plum tree, but to his surprise, it bore fruit, 2 golden plums. He showed them to his children with joy. These dreams echo an ancient image found across cultures, the idea that the soul, when cultivated, produces a fruit that endures. In Gnostic thought, the fruit of the soul is preserved in a heavenly barn. In Buddhism and Hinduism, it is karma, spiritual grain stored up through action. In Christianity, by their fruits you shall know them. If any man shall eat of the fruit, he shall live without hunger. One of von Franz's patients once heard a voice in a dream say, "Your life, which you have endured consciously, has redeemed hundreds, and will influence hundreds of generations to come." That's the dream's truth. Consciously lived suffering bears fruit, not always in this world, but somewhere. This is the stone, the diamond body, the eternal spark left behind. Von Franz once counseled a woman who had suffered a schizophrenic episode and lost all sense of meaning. The woman cried, "What is the point of my life? Even the medication won't help me anymore." Von Franz looked at her and said, "You are suffering for God." The woman smiled. "Thank you," she whispered. "Now I can live. Because what matters is not how long we live. What matters is whether we bring the fruit to ripeness." One dreamer saw herself tasked with cutting a perfect circle of wood, carving a sacred design, and recording its meaning for the public library. Not a literal library, a spiritual treasury, a place where the soul's legacy is stored. The fruit we grow in life may feed others after we're gone. Other dreams speak of death as a cure. One young woman, terminally ill and unconscious, suddenly awoke and told her analyst she had dreamt she was well again. The sun was shining. The doctor said she could leave the hospital. Then she turned and saw her own body, lying on the bed, dead. She passed away the next day. The tunnel. Many who return from near death describe passing through a dark tunnel before arriving at a realm of light, peace, and unimaginable beauty. The tunnel is a birth canal in reverse, death as rebirth. In dreams, this appears as a journey to the west, to the land of the setting sun, like in Egyptian mythology, where the dead journey with Ra through the underworld, only to rise again in the east. Sometimes the imagery grows darker, a black spot in the eye, a cloud descending. The soul's vision of the outer world fades. Discouragement sets in. This spirit of discouragement, as von Franz called it, is part of the soul detaching from the visible world, letting go. In a dream, a woman saw a dead black bird in the lake, its eye glittering like a diamond. She felt pulled toward it. Her husband told her, "It is right this way." The message? The outer shell may be lifeless, but at its core is a shining gem. Sometimes death arrives as a stranger, an intruder in the night, a burglar, a faceless man. One dreamer fled from the sinister figure. No one answered his calls for help. He returned to find the stranger still waiting. Death, when unrecognized, becomes terrifying, but when understood, it transforms. Jung himself dreamt of a monstrous wolf dog the night his mother died. It burst through the forest like a soul hunter. He knew the wild huntsman had claimed a spirit. Death appears as a wolf, a threshold, a candle going out on one windowsill, and lighting again on the other. And this shall be a sign unto you, of wholeness and oneness. Jung's final dream. Light is the most common symbol in death dreams and near-death experiences. Not blinding, but beautiful. A light that transforms you, dissolves the ego, and opens the soul to something formless, beyond time and space. One man described entering a shining lattice of cold light. As it consumed him, it didn't destroy, it transformed. He became formless, spaceless. He said, "I was not in another place. I was in another state of being." Jung never stopped emphasizing it. A part of the psyche is not bound by space or time. This timeless, spaceless soul is the part of us that dreams. that endures, that enters fire and emerges as the red stone, that withers like a flower, only to bloom again, that suffers and produces fruit, and maybe, just maybe, that part of us knows what death really is. In the end, there is a moment, silent, unseen, when the soul must decide. Theologian Ladislaus Boras proposed a provocative idea, that at the very moment of death, each person is asked to make their final decision, to open themselves to the divine, or to close themselves off from it forever. In that instant, time collapses into eternity and the choice becomes fate, not a punishment imposed from outside, but a self-judgment, a final echo of one's deepest truth. Heaven or hell isn't granted, it's chosen. But there's another possibility, one that Jungian and alchemical symbolism suggest, that at the moment of death, the great opposites are reconciled, that the soul doesn't divide, but unites. That instead of judgment, there is transformation, and instead of an ending, there is a beginning that consciousness cannot yet imagine. We are all tormented by the need to decide, the need to resolve, and perhaps it is precisely this which is the eternal suffering. For Jungian analyst Marie-Louise von Franz, death dreams didn't offer easy answers. Instead, they opened doors to new questions, questions that pierce the veil. Does the soul survive indefinitely or only for a time? What does timeless existence mean? Do the dead know each other? Does reincarnation play a role in all of this? There are no final answers. But in the dreams of the dying, those spontaneous mythic messages from the unconscious, one theme repeats. Something essential remains, not the everyday ego, the part of us obsessed with traffic, taxes, and emails. That disappears, but the purified self, the essence forged through suffering, love, insight, and loss, that part seems to endure. That is the self. And in every dream, it appears untouched by death. Perhaps that is what this life is really for, to shape that essence, to become it. The meaning of life in this light isn't to avoid death, it's to achieve conscious realization, to bring light into the darkness, to suffer, love, and understand with such clarity that what remains of us can cross the threshold intact. This idea is not just spiritual, it's cosmic. If consciousness is bound into the fabric of the universe, then every moment of inner realization, every honest confrontation with pain, has a universal impact. If one man conquers his inner confusion, von Franz once said, the universe shifts. So perhaps the question isn't what happens when we die. Perhaps the real question is, what will you leave behind? Not in a will or a legacy or a monument, but in the invisible field of the soul, in the dream space, in the roots, the fire, the light, the stone, and the fruit. Because maybe, in the end, death is just the moment when the self takes shape, when all your choices, all your sufferings, all your awakenings crystallize into something eternal, a kind of sacred flame, a golden fruit, a red stone. So when that moment comes, when the candle flickers and the tunnel opens and the stranger steps through the door, ask yourself, have I lived? Have I suffered consciously? Have I turned darkness into light? Because if so, then the final decision may already be made, and the soul, when it crosses over, will not be afraid. It will simply go home. If this journey through the dreams of the dying stirred something in you, consider subscribing for more deep dives into the mysteries of the mind, soul, and cinema. Leave a comment. What dream or insight from this video stayed with you the most? And if you found value here, give it a like. It helps this kind of content reach others searching for meaning beneath the surface. Until next time, stay curious and stay conscious.